Welcome to Leave No Doubt. Thank you for joining me, Billy Bodin. How you doing, Bill?
All good, mate. All good.
It's been a while since I've seen you, mate. How's it going?
Yeah, no, it's going well. Back playing and, yeah, just trying to crack on, mate.
A lot of people won't, through viewing this, I think most will probably be Bristol Rovers fans that, you know, watch the podcast, and hopefully a lot of other people that are interested in football would probably just see your journey and see the highs and see the moments where you score and when you're chopping people up in games, and actually there's much more to your journey than what probably people think. So by doing this, by hosting this conversation, you know, I hope to give people information that will help them. I think a lot of your story is relatable for a lot of people. So to get us started, many people probably won't know that your father is a professional footballer himself. You know, off camera there, you've just told me he's recently stopped his role working with the FAW within the Welsh national teams with the young players. What was it like for you growing up in an environment with a professional footballer, and how do you think that had an impact on your development as a player?
Well, to be honest, it was the reason why I got into footy. Obviously, going to see him play sort of towards the end of his career, and but no, yeah, he definitely helped me massively. He wasn't one of those pushy sort of parents on the touchline, but obviously after a game, he'd obviously give me advice and tell me what to do better and what I've done wrong, and so yeah, in that way, I'd say he definitely helped me become sort of the player I am, and yeah, no, it was obviously massive for me because that's all I ever wanted to do. So to get that feedback from someone who's been there, done it, and had a good career, so yeah, it was massive for me to get started.
It's interesting that you say that your father obviously played and didn't put pressure on you to play, although he'd give you advice and stuff. I think actually, you know, some parents reach out to me and watch this podcast, and be quite interested in, you know, hearing this as to how they could possibly treat their child or, you know, son or daughter in their football journey. When you say he never put any pressure on you, but he gave you advice, like what sort of advice did he give you?
Just little things during the game, maybe. Could be anything. You've been there and played. It's just say if I've sort of not done the right pass or not done the right movement, maybe you might just give me little pointers to sort of make my game better. But it was never the case of getting in the car and having a go at me or sort of making me cry as if I have seen other parents sort of do that. So no, it was always helpful, and I've got a nephew, and my brother-in-law goes to watch him, and he says there's parents screaming at their kids on the touchline. So it was never like that. But another thing that he also became my coach, I think, at under 14. So he obviously got to see me during training sessions then, and he wouldn't sort of treat me any differently. But he'd obviously still give that advice to me and other lads. So I think when someone has played the game for that long, you always sort of listen to them that little bit more. Obviously, there's a lot of coaches now who have never played the game, but they are clued up and they know the game inside out. So, but I think when I was younger, you would sort of you'd probably listen more to someone who's been there and done it. So, yeah, to me, I listened to everything he said. Like I said, he's been there and done it, and for me, obviously, he was my dad, but also someone who played the game that I want to go on to do. So, yeah, anything he said, I took on board and tried doing exactly what he said in either the next game or the next session.
So, what's your relationship with your dad like now that you've played at a top level and consistently playing week in, week out? What sort of information is he giving you now?
To be honest, we still obviously we probably talk football every day when I give him a call or he calls me, but it's probably still the same, to be honest. He still obviously will not go through the game, but if he comes to watch a game, he'll just say if I've done well or not. If I've had an absolute stinker, then he will tell me. So, but yeah, it's literally the same as it always has been. If I've had a good game, he'll tell me, and yeah, it's a weird. Not a weird relationship because he's my dad and that's what I've been used to. But yeah, it's something that I've sort of got used to throughout my career, or as child. So whether he gives me good advice or gives me negative feedback, then so be it. But it's something that I've had to sort of deal with, and like I said, I think it's definitely helped me during my sort of childhood and my playing career.
I can't imagine that you and your dad are similar players either, right? Like when he played, it'd be much different to when you play. So he might see things that you're not seeing, and that might happen in other, child and parent relationships where the information that they're getting from their parents might not be what they're seeing. In your life, and I want to start from probably when you were under 14, mine and your journey together started when we were kids as well. We played in the youth national teams together, both in centre midfield actually. That was going back a while, wasn't it? I remember we started playing for Rovers as right back and right midfield, sort of laughing about once upon a time we were centre midfield partners. But your journey in terms of your position and your abilities, what was like when obviously your dad is giving you information? And the reason why I asked this, because not only was he your father, but he was your coach. If coaches are giving players information on their game that they might not think is relevant to them, or it might suit a different position or suit a different ability, like you were growing up, how did you go from like being a centre midfielder to a wide man, and what was the sort of information that your coaches were giving you about that?
To be honest, I was always just a number 9 growing up. Always played up top, and obviously my dad was a left back, so I think it's obviously a totally different position. But like I said, he's played the game and he knows, he's coached for that many years, that he's entitled to give his opinion because he's a coach, and he was my coach as well, not just my dad. So he obviously knew the game, and he obviously knew how to play different positions. So for me, I always scored goals as a young lad, and I think once I got to sort of 16, 17, I was still really small and probably hadn't quite developed yet. So, playing up top, I used to just get bullied and pushed off the ball. So it probably made me drop a little bit deeper, which is once we met with the Welsh and started playing a bit deeper as a centre mid. But yeah, the advice would always be just the same as what it would be if I was whatever position I was. Obviously, like I said, he played the game for that many years. He knew different positions and how to play them positions. So whatever advice he gave me, I always took it on board, and it always helped. And like you said, once I sort of probably got a bit more physicality in me, I sort of started drifting into different positions, and and then obviously ended up sort of, most people know me as a wide man now. So although I probably wouldn't have wanted to play there, that's where I've ended up.
It's probably the outstanding talents that you have of being able to take the ball and beat people, and being so comfortable in possession has maybe pushed you into that role possibly. But I'm interested to know, Bill, that when you were, you left school, you become, a youth team player at Swindon, you go through that period, you become a professional at Swindon, you make your debut for the first team. We sit here now knowing that you if not for injuries, you'd probably still be playing in the Championship, but we both know you was capable of playing in the Championship, and you have done, you've shown that, and even when, at Bristol Rovers, you were playing way above the level that you were. What do you think possibly didn't go for you or didn't work out when you were 19 years old at Swindon?
I think sort of when we were sort of that age, I think football was a lot different to now. I think obviously young lads nowadays, they probably do get a little bit more of a chance to make it through the first team. And I think at that time, being 18, I think it was when I was 18, I sort of made my debut, made a couple of appearances. And then sort of the first team at that time were struggling, and we were sort of near the bottom of the league. So I think that played a bit of a factor. And then obviously we got relegated that year. And then DeCanio came in to Swindon, and it was a bit of a mess, to be honest. And although I made a few appearances and a few starts here and there, I still knew my future wasn't with them. And he told me that a couple of times. So the best thing for me, and I tell this to the young lads now, and even when I was sort of at Preston, Bristol Rovers, is to go on loan and get experience. And for me, that was massive for me, to go and play every week in League Two. it was obviously a bit of a shock to the system at first. Some of the players you come up against, as you know. But yeah, it was great experience, and then I actually did come back to Swindon and get into the team. And yeah, I think just going on loan as a young lad is massively important, especially if you're not playing. And but yeah, that I'd say that definitely helped me, especially when I wasn't really getting a sniff at Swindon.
Welcome to the Leave No Doubt podcast. I'm so excited to welcome our new sponsors, Connection Technologies, a market leader in business-to-business tools ranging from business mobile, hosted telephony and fixed line services. Head over to their website at www.connection-technologies.co.uk, fill in their inquiry web form and find out how Connection Technologies can support your business moving forward. People talk, a lot of the guys that I've spoken about actually talk about loans with playing a big part in their career, really, playing a really important role. And a lot of them, obviously, at the time, see a loan as a negative thing. As you know, if that's your option at the time, it means that you're not in the first team, which can obviously be seen as a bad thing. But it ends up becoming a positive after you've gained more experience. You know, you did that really well. I'm sort of intrigued to know, and I'm sure other people are. Like, I've had a conversation that will probably be out by now with Matt Ritchie, and there's conversations with other guys. Simon Ferry, obviously, this Di Canio era at Swindon gets a lot of airtime for some stories that, you know, of Di Canio being a bit mad and stuff like that. And, you know, I'm not necessarily asking you for mental stories, but when Matty talks about his time at Swindon with Di Canio, he can't speak highly enough of, you know, the impact that he had on his career. And he tells a story of how Di Canio sort of said that he was a fat boy on his first day and got him fit. I'm wondering what possibly, you know, because I must reiterate again, we're sat here and you're one of the most talented players that, you know, I've ever been in a team with. I'm just wondering why, or possibly why, that time at Swindon under Di Canio might not have gone as well for you as it did do for others. Yeah,
it's a weird one, because I started the season in that team, and I think I played 3 times and then was just totally out of the team, out of the squad, sat in the stand watching. And although he was a great coach, and Matty and Si have probably said that, he was a very good coach. I think for a young lad, you didn't really know, he didn't really have many conversations with the young lads, or to let you know where you sort of stood in the team or the squad. And like the likes of sort of Nathan Thompson was there at the time, and I remember he sort of went off and got told he had to train with the youth team, and he's gone on to sort of have a good career. So yeah, I think as a young lad at that time it was difficult. There was a lot of young lads who were probably able to play in the first team, good enough to play in the first team, and 2 years later they probably weren't even playing football at all. So yeah, it was a tough time, but like I said, that the fact that I went on loan and gained that experience, where a few of the boys sort of my age probably didn't, sort of fell away from the game in the end because of that. Probably because of not sort of going and gaining experience, or maybe because of the managers sort of not letting them know where they stood. And you know how it is, some lads can sort of just be comfortable in that environment and end up sort of just wasting the start of their career away. So yeah, it's strange. There's a lot of people who like Matty said, he enjoyed it under him, and it was a big part of his career. So I'd probably say it was a big part of my career, because I knew I had to sort of move on, and obviously it was my hometown club, so I wanted to be there as long as I could. And when you get told you're not gonna, you can stay but you're not gonna play, yeah, it's not a nice feeling. But you know, for the sake of my career, I'm gonna have to move on and try and make it elsewhere.
Tell me then, if knowing what you do now, you could go back in time and play that period of your life again, would you do anything differently?
I probably would, to be fair. I'd probably just knock on his door and say, what can I do to get in the team? The one time I did knock on his door and asked to go on loan, he told me to get out and to piss off on loan. So But yeah, no, as an experienced player now, I probably would have just gone in and said, what can I do to get in your team? This is the team this is where I'm from. This is who I want to play for. What can I do to get in the team? So yeah, there's probably other times in my career where I probably should have done that as well. And when you look back, you never know if it's a regret or not. But as a young lad, you get told what to do and you do it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, that is one thing I probably would have changed at that time.
I think the way that you asked that question, for me personally, that you articulated that as by saying, what can I do to get in the team? And didn't say, why am I not in the team? Because the two questions are very different, right? One's sort of like an attack on a manager, and the other is asking a manager for help. And I think the more so, I've actually spoken about it on this podcast before, the more so that young players try and get people on board with their journey instead of, trying to attack people and say like, oh, why am I not in the team? From, sort of a passive aggressive way, that can help them a lot. Yeah,
no, definitely. I think I don't know if it's the younger lads nowadays, but yeah, they seem to have a bit more to say for themselves, and they're probably a bit more confident, to be honest. And yeah, like you said, you could go in there and say slightly the wrong thing, and it looks like you're sort of having a go at the manager, where if I was never in the team, I wouldn't go straight into the manager's office saying, why aren't I playing? Or if I did speak to him, I'd always say, what can I do? Or how can I make an impact on getting into the team? Or because I always knew once I'm on the pitch, I could try and influence the game, or the player I was quite creative, or I am quite creative. So I know once I'm on the pitch, I can try and make things happen. So the fact that when you're not playing, I think it is a big thing to speak to the manager or the coaches and just find out what the manager wants from you and what can you do to get in the team. That is, at the end of the day, that's what everyone wants to do. They want to be in the team and they want to be playing. So there's no point just sitting there wasting away or not finding out. That was the one thing, even when I was at Preston, a few times where I was fit and not getting any game time, I'd always ask the manager, what can I do to get in the team? And I think it's not, like you said, it's not an attack on the manager or his decision, but at the end of the day, you want to be playing. So for a young lad, I'd always ask questions and just to find out what the manager is thinking and what he wants from you. Because at the end of the day, if you're not going to ask him, you're not going to know what he needs or what he wants.
I'm glad in sort of what you just said there, Bill, you described yourself as creative, because I'm very conscious that I don't want to come across as too much of a fanboy towards you, and that a lot of the guys that I've spoken to from some sort of that Rovers era, when I ask them who the best player they've played with is, your name is more often than not the name that they say. So I'm really interested in, and the word creative takes a lot of balls, to be honest. It's to be a creative player, in my opinion, it's really, really difficult to be that guy that wants to get on the ball and make things happen. My job is, as I've played in defence and as sort of like a holding midfielder now, and my job is almost to fun stop and to feed people like you, really. You made my life much easier at Bristol Rovers. My job was to feed you with the ball. It was an absolute dream for me. It made me look good, and in the end, I think I probably ended up with a couple of assists just from giving you the ball in our own half. But that mindset that you've got and that confidence to be able to try things that don't come off and try them again and don't come off, try them again, that's pretty rare. That's pretty unique within football, because as we all know now, especially in academies and stuff, everybody's judged all the time, and a giveaway or the ball breaking down on somebody is often seen as a negative. And I know that players now are so persistent on being perfect, and perfection doesn't exist. And you've never really had that mindset. You've always been able to just get over stuff really easily and try again. And I'm wondering, where do you think that comes from?
To be honest, it's probably started at a young age. I was, like I said earlier, I was always sort of one of the small ones, and I'd get pushed off the ball quite easy, and it was always just never give up, sort of. Once I got to it was probably about 12, I remember just lads growing and being that much bigger, and like you said, I was always sort of a creative player, but when things didn't happen, I just knew that's my strong part of my game. So getting on the ball or trying things. So when I did either sort of get shrugged off the ball or sort of give it away, I knew, well, that's the strongest part of my game. So I'm going to have to keep doing it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know where it's sort of, it's hard to say where it come from, but it's just that's always been sort of my mentality, is in just to keep doing what you're good at and to keep trying things. And like you said, some people might find it the hardest thing in football, but that was just my game, and that's how I wanted to play. So yeah, it's a tough one to actually put a finger on when it started, but that's just how I've always sort of thought, and that's how I've always sort of wanted to play the game. But
see, like you've played. Say when Bristol Rovers was at its peak for us, it was sort of like 10,000 people in the MEM, and they're expecting of you probably, and that's for your own. That's for your own doing. Like, people ended up expecting things from you, and if for whatever reason that didn't come off, you've played in Championship, grounds that hold 20, 30,000 people. Like, you've had thousands and thousands of people watch you. Like, if for whatever reason something doesn't come off, how are you able to, to push out the noise and just continue to, because, we both know people that would go into their shell in a game and hide away from the ball.
To be honest, I think I probably have done a few times in games where not that I'm trying to not get the ball, but it probably, that first couple of times you might give it away trying something. I always thought, next time I get it, I'll keep it simple, make sure I don't give it away, and then sort of try and ease my way back into the game, which is hard at times, because if you do get it in a sort of an attacking area, you need to do what you're on the pitch to do. Well, for me anyway, was to try and make something happen. So I always just try to be as positive as I can, whatever the situation, to be honest, whether it was an injury or giving it away and having a sort of a bad 10 minutes. So yeah, I always just wanted to be as positive as I can on the pitch, and just to always sort of play with a smile on my face. That was one of the main things as a young lad. And yeah, like you said, you might give it away, and you might have the crowd on your back or your own team because they're expecting something big from you. But yeah, I just always tried to block out the noise if I did give it away, and just to stick to what I know, and that was to obviously try and get on the ball and just to be positive.
It's funny you say your own teammates there, because I think I probably made the most overlaps around you without being given the ball of anybody that I've ever played with. And I used to think, that's fair enough. Like, I actually remember Darryl Clark sort of saying to you, high five him on the way back. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
He'd say high five him on the way back, just so he knows that you appreciate it. And I used to think, even if Billy doesn't give it to me, I've really helped him there.
Yeah. No, to be fair, I said this in a podcast before, that you, even James Clark, Ledsy, you are basically what made a lot of my goals, even though you probably didn't touch the ball. Just making that run, because I noticed it massively when I went to Preston. They never really wanted the fullbacks to bomb on as much. So by the time I got the ball and I was 1v1, it was literally 1v1 or a 2v1, because their winger had recovered, and I'm up against two sort of players here. And after about a month of playing in that Preston team in the Championship, I realised, like, actually fullbacks making that overlap is massively helped me, because obviously I always wanted to cut inside, or and yeah, I remember I used to say to my dad, like I don't know what's going on. I can't beat my man, or I'm not like getting that extra yard. But yeah, I think for a fullback or a winger, the fullback making that run is such a massive difference to when they don't make that run. And yeah, obviously if the fullback stays still, I roll you down the line and you cross one in for a goal. So but yeah, it's definitely a big help to have a fullback bombing on, and especially the player I am. I'm not one that is that quick, but I still want to beat my man, whether it's sort of a bit of skill or a little jink. So yeah, for that fullback to just to create that extra half a yard for me is massive.
There wasn't many times that those crosses ended up in goals, mate. But no, I'll make sure that Clarkie and Ledsy get hold of this podcast, because that's probably the most credit that the three of us ever got. So yeah, that's nice. But those, that talent that you've got as a wide man, right, who creates, and I would implore anybody who is unsure as to why I'm sort of talking this nicely about you, Bill, to just type your name into YouTube and just watch what comes up and enjoy. But I'm interested to know how, your outstanding attribute of being able to chop someone up, it looks like you're going to shoot, and you obviously chop in and just trying to, and beating people by getting half a yard. And honestly, so many of the goals, you just think, oh, this guy's like, I'm watching it, I know what's going to happen. I've seen it. I was there, and you still chop, and I'm surprised. Like it's seriously impressive. But where's, that one outstanding attribute that's allowed you to score so many goals or create so much? Was that a conscious effort to learn that, or did that sort of just naturally come into your game?
I think it just naturally came into my game. I was always, when I was younger, I always tried doing skills, but probably in the wrong areas at a young age, and that was always a big part of my game. I had good feet and would always do step overs and chop back onto my right or my left. And obviously, the older you get, the more you realise, obviously, I can't do all these fancy tricks and stuff like that. But the one thing that I always, like I said, I wasn't rapid, so I always knew that if I get half a yard or a yard on the defender up against me, then I can either get a cross in or a shot. So, and the one thing that obviously always worked for me was just to fake either shooting or crossing it, and people call it the chop. So that was probably the one of the main things I used to do, or still do, to be honest, just to create that extra yard or half a yard, just to get a cross or a shot, or even just to roll someone in. So it definitely came as I used to always try it as a young lad, and I think the older I got, the probably the less I do it, to be honest, because I'm not quite as quick as I was. So, it was something that I still do, and I think it helped me massively because, like I said, I wasn't the quickest, so I always knew that if I take a touch, then a defender's probably going to try and get as tight as he can because he's probably quicker than me. So if I do chop it back inside, they're probably going to go for it. So and thankfully it worked. It worked a lot at Bristol Rovers, and I managed to get a lot of success out of it.
I wanted to try and sort of backtrack a little bit from this Bristol Rovers time, because there's an important part of your career that a lot of people probably don't know about, and we'll get into it. Forgive me if I'm wrong, Bill, but you went obviously on loan to Torquay. You ended up going to Crewe permanently, right? So
No. So I went to, I think I was 19, and I went on loan to Torquay at the start of that season. I came back to Swindon, played a couple of times, and then that's when sort of Canio said, "Nah, you're not going to play for me." And then that was when you could go on loan in sort of March, and mad times back then. So in the March, I ended up going on loan to Crewe till the end of the season, and getting promoted with them to League One, and then signed for Torquay the following season then.
And it was the end of that season with Torquay that you suffered that knee injury?
So it would have been, the end of the following year, so 2 years after that. So I signed a 2-year contract at Torquay after having a good sort of loan spell there. Things just didn't work out. I think the manager left after about 6 months of me signing there, and and we had a bad sort of spell, to be honest. And we just about stayed up that year. And then the following year, it sort of carried on. We had a few different managers, and the team was getting changed all the time because of new managers coming in, and it just didn't work for anyone, to be honest. And then I ended up doing my ACL sort of in the March, and my contract was up at the end of that season in the May. So
See, like that, obviously those 2 years, I can imagine that was, that period of time for you was difficult, because when you're in a team that's struggling and you're a creative player, more often than not, you're the casualty, right? You're the guy that doesn't get picked, because teams or managers like to go with safer players who they might get a little bit more out of for whatever reason, in terms of defensively. Yeah. This period of time in your life, mate, obviously when you suffer an ACL knee injury in March and your contract's up in probably the end of that June.
Yeah.
How, talk me through that, that time as best you can, because people are probably out there, going to suffer with injuries. I was super lucky with the injuries that I had in terms of that I had a contract. The guys at Bournemouth really looked after me, but we're about to talk to you in quite a lot of depth about how you managed to get over a knee injury that you had no football club to rehabilitate in. So talk to me about not necessarily how you did it, but like how you felt when that happened and how quickly you realised that this might be more of a difficult process to get fit than what you first thought.
Yeah, it's a strange one because I'd never ever got injured up until this point. And I was I think I was 22 at the time, maybe 23. And I've never had an injury. And when they told me you've done your ACL, you need an operation, I still didn't have a clue what that meant. I thought, a couple of months maybe. And then, obviously finding out it's going to be probably about a year out of the game, and my contract was up, so I didn't really know what was going on. I thought they might have just let me do my rehab there, or but obviously being from Swindon and Torquay being about 2.5 hours away, they sort of said it's up to you. When you're not going to get paid, obviously, if you do want to do your rehab here. So I was basically released from Torquay, but with no ACL. And I actually had to pay for the operation myself as well. I had to get the PFA involved, and they helped me out massively, to be honest. So once I had my operation, that was sort of when it sunk in a little bit. But even at the time, because I was so young, I never really realised how much of a difficult spell this was in my sort of life, to be honest. It's only when I look back now and I think, wow, how did I get through that? But yeah, at the time, I was just always confident that once I was back fit, that I'd get a club. I knew I was sort of good enough to still play in the league, and so yeah, I always tried staying positive. Although when I look back, I think, wow, that was pretty mad, to be honest. Because yeah, like I said, once I left Torquay, I had my operation. I spoke to the PFA, and they helped me out going to St George's. I think I went 6 times throughout that next season. The reason why I got fit was because I knew a physio from Swindon who was working for Bristol City at the time, and I think my dad might have asked him if he could print up a rehab sheet, basically, just to go to the gym on my own and do. And he basically done that, and he invited me down, I think, once a week just to do 2 hours of rehab. So yeah, from that June when I had my operation till probably November, I was basically doing it by myself, to be honest. And then once a week I'd go to a physio. And yes, when I'm saying it now, I'm thinking that's mad, because if you do your knee now, you'd be in the gym every day, and you'd have a physio alongside you every single day. So it was strange, because I'd just go to the gym on my own, the local gym, and I'd have a bit of paper in front of me and just go through all the exercises, and then on a Tuesday I'd go to Bristol and just see this physio who I knew, he obviously helped me out massively. And then that was it for probably 6 months. And my old manager at Torquay, Alan Neal, basically just rung me and said, would you want to come to Northampton to finish your rehab, and we'll see how it goes. You can sort of come on trial, and yeah, we'll see how it goes, and if you do well, we'll give you a deal to the end of the season. So yeah, that first sort of six months of not being at an actual football club and just doing it by myself was it was mad, to be honest, because like I said, you would never get that I wasn't basically a footballer at that time. If you were a footballer, you'd have a physio every day, and so yeah, it was tough. But because I was so young, I never really realised how sort of tough it was at that time. I remember I used to always joke to my mates that I was gonna get a job at Foot Locker because I like trainers. And obviously, luckily, I wasn't stupid with my money at a young age. And for that 6 months, obviously, I had savings behind me which I could use, but it was sort of slowly running out. Having to pay for the car, and luckily I moved back from Torquay to my mum and dad's, so I stayed at my mum and dad's for that time. And so yeah, obviously it was a tough time, but because I was so young, I was sort of probably quite naive to realise how bad I had it at that time. And one of the main things, I had a good group of mates around me, and my family were there for me. But yeah, I always tried staying positive, and and I always backed my ability if I did go into a club that I would earn a contract, because I knew I could probably play at this level. So yeah, when I did go into Northampton, I think I had about 2 months left of my rehab, and they helped me out massively, to be honest. Finishing that was obviously the last 2 months is probably the hardest, getting back on the pitch and running, and yeah, it was tough, but it was what I'd needed. And yeah, to not have that for almost a year, it was tough. But yeah, it was a strange time in my career, because, like I keep saying, I was so young that I never really realised how bad it actually was.
It's an incredible story, mate, really, isn't it? Because we look back now, and you're saying that it was probably a darker time than what you actually realised it was then. I've watched you do interviews, obviously, and certainly the one when you joined Bristol Rovers, and it was Keith Brookman, obviously, asking the questions, and he's asking you, like, oh, what have you done in the last however long? And the answer, as most young lads give in an interview, is I just worked hard. And I thought, how incredibly difficult must it have been for you every single morning to wake up and to get yourself down the gym? I'm interested to know if you can go a little bit deeper, Bill, into what working hard meant for you, and how much you had to, because, it's so easy to be unmotivated. It's so easy to not go to the gym. It probably takes people much more, and we obviously live in a world now where mental health is much more of a thing than it was back then. And this people being able to motivate themselves to do this sort of stuff, like you're saying, you didn't have a football club, but you still managed to get yourself to the gym every day. You didn't have a physio, but through you and your father, you still managed to reach out to someone who could help you. Like, how much, when you look back now, how much did you have to really force yourself to go through that, and how much was it sort of just natural?
I think it was because all I'd ever wanted was to make it. And although I'd made it to a certain point, I'd probably played 100 games in League Two maybe, and a couple in League One, which, as we know, you've not made it after 100 games. But yeah, it was just the desire to get back playing and doing what I love, basically, which is what got me out of my bed in the morning, got me to go to the gym on my own, and just the love of the game, basically, because I knew how much I missed not playing and not being just at a training ground with the lads every day. You do miss it all, and just to be on your own at home or in the gym, it was although people say it's hard work, yeah, of course it's hard work, but I think it's just the fact that how much you really want to play the game you love. And I watch football every night. I watch football literally every day of my life. So it is a sport that I probably couldn't live without, to be honest. So yeah, just in the back of my mind the whole time during that time was just to get back as strong as I could, and the main thing was just to get back playing, basically. Like I said, I knew if I went into a club on trial that I was capable of playing at I knew I was going to go into a team in probably League Two on trial. So I knew I could play at that level. But I just knew I had to be, I knew my knee had to be as strong as possible. So, and I didn't want to break down. Obviously, going in on trial, you don't want to be all of a sudden sat on the injury bed again. So it was just the desire to get back playing, really. That was what drove me to do it all. But at the time, like I just said, you don't really realise that until years later when you're thinking about it and you think, wow, how was I getting out of bed every day with no physio, doing my own rehab? But it was obviously I just wanted to get back playing that bad that I was willing to sort of do anything really.
So go on then, mate. You go through that period of not being sure about your future, right? You go to Northampton and they sort your rehab for you at the end. But you don't sign at Northampton. And I know through Ellis Harrison, obviously, he reached out to the manager at Bristol Rovers and you were offered a trial. How did you, somebody who, as we both sit here now, went on to become the most important player in that Bristol Rovers team, how did you approach the experience and the feeling of going in as a trial player?
It was strange, to be honest, because I'd been on trial at Chelsea as a young lad when I was about 13, and I got told I was too small. So that was the only ever time I've been on trial somewhere. So it was a strange experience. Obviously, I went in and I knew lads, which helped massively. I knew probably 3 or 4 of the lads. So going in straight away, because I knew some of them, I was at ease and I was probably a lot more relaxed than if I went to a club which I knew no one, and I was on trial. So Els, Mance, Ledsy, they obviously helped massively. It was a weird feeling. I've obviously tried getting as fit as I could. During that off season, and I'd probably been doing too many weights because I still get bantered about it now that I look like a bodybuilder. So, I just tried to be as strong and as possible. To be honest, when I came back from my injury, probably done too many chest press, but. Yeah, it was a weird. Obviously, I went into that pre-season just trying to be as fit as I could, it was after about 2 weeks when Darryl sort of pulled me and said we're going to offer you something, but it's only going to be a month-to-month contract. So, and at that time, I was going to take anything. To be fair, like I told you, I was unemployed for probably 8-9 months in total. So, the fact that they were giving me any type of contract after sort of 2 weeks of training, I'd bite their hands off. Obviously, the season started, and I think after about a game, they then gave me another contract till the it was a 3-month contract. It was a weird experience, but then after probably a week into that contract, I got another contract till I think it was the January then. So I always knew if I was playing, then I'd back my ability to show the manager what I can do, and to obviously at that time to get a new contract, because nobody really wants to be on a month-to-month or a 3-month contract. So and it's the same again going. At the time, you don't really think too much into it. You just think, there's a contract there. I'll train every day. I'll play, or try and get into the team at the time. But then when you look back, it's mad to think that I was on a month-to-month contract. And like most people, you would never want to be in that situation. But at the time, I was young and I was just enjoying my football again, so I was happy to sort of take anything they gave me, to be honest.
I think it's something I'm learning about you right now, Bill, is really the depth of your mindset, really, in terms of you're around the place, and if people have ever met you, you're a happy guy, you like to have a joke around, but that sort of grit and determination to make it is something I probably haven't given you enough credit for. And in some of the darkest moments of your career, you've somehow seemed to be able to muster up what it takes to be able to get over that. And I think being a trialist, or even being asked to go on trial, has its certain stigma about it, that you're going in as somebody who's less than others, right?
Yeah.
Going in as a trialist, and you're sort of saying, you wanted to focus on as fit as you possibly could be. do you think that was important for you to go in there and have a positive impact? Do you think focusing on fitness was a good way to go?
Yeah, I think my game, obviously, I've always been comfortable with the ball, and I've probably not struggled, but I probably wasn't as fit as I could have been in previous seasons when I was at Torquay, and so yeah, that year at Bristol Rovers when I went on trial, I knew that summer I've got to get as fit as I can, so at least when I'm in training, I can show what I can do on the ball, and I've also got that fitness behind me. And yeah, obviously it was tough because I'd been used to just pure running during my rehab, and then I did a little bit of training with Northampton. I think I made maybe 2 or 3 appearances, but you're never in the team, and you're never really getting that run of game time, which is tough because, like match fitness is totally different to just running around a field all day, which is basically what I was doing. So the one thing I did focus on was sort of my running that summer, and just to try and get as fit and as strong as I could, because I knew technically I had the ability to sort of make it at this level. So yeah, it was a big thing for me, and it still probably is now, because I'm not a natural runner or naturally fit when it comes to sort of just pre-season running, and I'd never wanted to sort of finish bottom, and being on trial and you're finishing bottom of the running never looks good. So it was one thing I made sure that I was sort of on top of that summer, and it obviously it helped to a certain degree.
You are obviously sat here as a success story of somebody who's gone on trial. And it does happen a lot, it doesn't happen all the time, don't get me wrong, people go on trial, every day and don't for whatever reason get taken by a club or a manager, but, you did. So I'm interested to know what advice you'd have for other people who are approaching trials as to how to do that. I'm not going to say successfully because it's not guaranteed, but how can they best prepare themselves for a trial?
To be honest, I think you just got to go in with an open mind, and not be. It's hard because you want to go in being confident, which is a big thing for me. I always backed my ability wherever I went. So going in on trial, I knew I'd back my ability to sort of join in with the lads and to be good on the ball and just to do what I've always done. But at the same time, you don't want to be coming across as cocky, or especially as a trialist. And obviously the downside, you never know what the outcome will be. So as much as I was always confident on the pitch, I was probably bricking it off the pitch because I knew that it could go one or two ways. But yeah, it's a tough one. But I think you just got to go in. If you do go in on trial somewhere, you've just got to be yourself, basically, and just show the manager what you can do on the pitch, or whether it's running is your strength. Be the best at running in the pre-season runs or the runs you do. I think you've just got to be the best sort of version of yourself in that short time. I think my trial was a 2-week trial, which is probably in a pre-season, that's maybe 2 or 3 games in that time. So it's not long, to be honest, to be able to see a player who you're going to end up giving a contract to. So I knew it was going to be tough, and I think in my first sort of couple of games I scored, I think, 4 goals, which obviously helped massively. But obviously not everyone's a sort of an attacker, so I think you've just got to stamp your authority or your game as quickly as you can, and show the manager as quickly as you can what you can do, because before you know it, that 2 weeks could be up and you've still not shown the manager what you can do. So it is tough, but I just think you've got to be positive and show what you can do as quick as you can.
Looks like a masterstroke from the gaffer, doesn't it, Darryl Clark? But Ellis Harrison probably deserves a lot of credit for that move.
To be fair, Mance as well. I think I was on the way to the airport. I was going to Portugal with my mum and dad, and they both text me literally a minute after each other saying, would you come on trial to Bristol Rovers, our manager wants. I think he wanted a left winger at the time, and obviously I'm not much of a left winger. I prefer it on the right, but at that time I would have taken anything, to be honest. Even if they wanted a left back, I think I would have gone in and said I was a left back. But
they did.
Yeah. And and I was in the airport and Darryl rung me and thankfully he invited me in on a trial and and the rest was history, really.
So you didn't go on holiday?
No, sorry. So this was sort of this halfway through that summer, and I think that they went back to pre-season maybe 2 weeks later. So I had 2 weeks to sort of get my head around it and get up for it and do a bit more running on holiday. And then that was it then.
You say get up for it, but I can imagine a lot of people would see that as sort of like, I mean, I certainly would see it as 2 weeks to be anxious about it. How was it that you were able to deal with the pressure of, because the trial is so important, right? It's like, it's literally 2 weeks to be the best version of yourself. And if you're not, there's a possibility that might not work out for you. It happens to hundreds and hundreds of players that go into these trials. Obviously, just asked you how to best prepare for a trial, and you gave an incredible answer. But how did you manage to deal with that 2 weeks of a trial festering in your mind? What do you do?
The thing is, I always knew I was going to have to go in on trial somewhere. So the whole of that summer, I was probably quite anxious without realising. But like I said, because I knew I was going to have to go in on trial, it didn't really bother me, that 2 week period where I was sort of waiting. But all I kept thinking was, I've just got to go and like I said earlier, just go in and show what I can do. And even my dad would say, just go in and be yourself. And if they don't like that of you, or they don't like how you play, then so be it. Football is a game of opinions, as a lot of people have said, and I just knew if I go in and show my ability straight away, then hopefully the manager I'm the type of player that the manager wants, and thankfully it worked out.
So go on then, Bill, from your perspective, how do you go from being Billy Bodin, the trialist, to Billy Bodin, the most important player in that team?
It's a tough one, to be honest, but I think the manager has a big part to play, because he chose me week in, week out, and he let me not do what I wanted, but he let me have a freedom to a certain extent to sort of drift around the pitch and to try and get on the ball as much as I can and try and create as much as I can. And a lot of managers, even sort of going back a couple of years at Torquay, it was quite regimental, and I couldn't sort of go out of my position, and I think that's why they sort of put me on the left, because I was left-footed. They just thought, we'll put a lefty on the left and put crosses into the box. But like you said earlier, when a team's not doing well, those creative players probably don't get the ball as much, and it's harder to influence a game. So Darryl, he's got a massive part to play, because he sort of gave me that freedom to express myself and to try and just do what I was good at, which was just try and get on the ball and create things. So there wasn't really much you could put a finger on to say that is why I became that player. But I think the manager has a lot to play with, a big part of that.
I've of course joined Rovers the week before Matty left, right? Yep. So Matty Taylor was top boy. It was quite obvious he was top boy. He obviously left. And it was probably like a day or two after he'd gone that the manager just announced that you were his next top boy, and that if you ever needed a rest, you got a rest. If you ever wanted to train, you were allowed to train. And I know that there's sort of that freedom that obviously Darryl did give to you, but that's because you were producing on the pitch, right? So what do you think? We're talking about when you going on trial, you're talking about trying to be the best version of yourself, right? But what was the magic at that time, Bill, as to why you had become the best version of yourself? Like, it's all well and good, saying, the manager trusted me and just left me on no matter what. But, what was your football lifestyle like at that time? Like, what do you think was actually going on for other people's benefit to know, like, why were you able to perform so well, so consistently?
I literally, I couldn't put a finger on one particular reason why, but I was just happy at that time. Not that I'm not happy now, but I just remember being very happy at that time. Obviously, I'd just gone from not having a job, not having a team to play for, thinking about getting just a normal job, to all of a sudden playing every week in front of sort of 10,000 fans, and back to enjoying football. It was probably, I know I've said obviously already, it's massively down to the manager, but I think I was just so happy and positive in life in general, that when I did go onto the pitch, I knew straight away that I'd be able to influence the game, or at least create as many chances as I could in that game. And yeah, I used to say to my mates, joking about, night before a game, they used to come round and we'd have food, and I used to always say, "What celebration do you want me to do tomorrow?" Because I just had that feeling of I was going to score or at least play well every single time, and I was just so not happy. I was just so positive at that time in my life. I think because I'd gone through such a struggle sort of the year or two before, or even 3, because the whole sort of time at Torquay was a bit of a struggle, and my confidence was low, and it just seemed like my confidence was back, and I sort of trusted my ability to be able to go out there and perform. And yeah, even off the pitch, I was happy, and I've always tried to be quite happy and positive around the training ground and everywhere. So yeah, I couldn't. It's hard to exactly say what it was that made me so confident at that time. But yeah, that I just felt not unstoppable, but I just felt so good in myself. And when I got onto the pitch, I just felt extremely confident at that time.
People who listen to these podcasts, mate, who play, might obviously be trying to relate to your story in a way. And I think something I want to ask you for the benefit of others is, when you are performing well, and I'm hoping that obviously a lot of players that listen to this do end up performing well, and they put themselves in a position where they might be able to move on, right? So especially during the season that you and I were playing together, you were playing at such a level that from probably about November leading up to January, people were talking about Billy Bodin and where he might move on to, and which team might sign him, where in the Championship is he going to go. At what point did you start to think that moving on was a not only an ambition but a realistic ambition for you? And what did that do to you as a person? Like, I'm asking for the benefit of others. Like, when people are performing well, when do they know when the right time to try and move on is?
It's a difficult one, because you always want to play at the highest level possible. So when I first went to Bristol Rovers, I still thought to myself, if I do well, then I'll try and get a move or try and move on again. And if that didn't work, obviously I'd still be at a very good football club and play my trade in whatever league they were in at the time. So my aim was always to kick on and move on. But when I really realised there's a good opportunity or a good time to go was probably the start of that season. I think I'd scored, I think it was 13 both seasons before, and that was probably when I felt that pre-season. I felt the best I'd ever felt. I think it was when we went to, was it Spain? Oh no, Albufeira. Portugal. Yeah.
That was good fun.
Yeah. and that sort of pre-season, that was probably the fittest I've ever been. I remember just thinking I'll do loads this summer. I'd always had a bad start to the season. Whatever club I'd been at, I'd always sort of had a slow start. Not a bad start, but a slow start. And for some reason I knew that if I do loads this sort of off season, it'll give me a better chance to maybe get a move, or if I don't get a move, then I'll be in the best shape possible and I'll be able to play even better. But yeah, once that season started, I think I scored 4 in the first 4, and that was probably when I realised is come this January, then I'll probably get a move this January. So yeah, probably the start of that season is when I sort of realised, right, I can kick on again now.
Yeah, you scored 2 at Bury, didn't you? Yeah, somebody played a nice cross in. Yeah, that's a nice moment for me. But these obviously, you end up at Preston in the Championship, right? But they paid a lot of money for you. But at that time, such an important player to Bristol Rovers. What conversations do you like? Because I haven't had that really. When I moved to Bristol Rovers, the manager called me on my way to training. I agreed on the phone. There was no agent telling me, this club might be interested in you. Like I can imagine it was for you.
Yeah.
So how does that process work? How many clubs did, I'm not going to ask you to name the clubs, but you sit down with your agent, what does he do? Does he call you? Does he tell you these clubs are interested? Did you have a decision to make over where you wanted to go? What did that sort of period look like?
So I think it was that summer where my agent sort of told me there was a few clubs who were interested, but there was sort of a couple of clubs who had embargoes and they couldn't really afford to pay the money Bristol Rovers wanted, and I didn't really think too much into it, to be honest. And I just remember thinking, I'll just have a good pre-season and that'll be that. And then obviously I started scoring at the start of that season, and I just remember sort of even other people's agents ringing me and texting me saying, these are after you and these are after you, which obviously I don't think they're allowed to do, but it goes on. And yeah, I just remember thinking, wow, this is crazy. And people tagging me all over Twitter and stuff like that. And it was a bit surreal, to be honest, because some of the teams getting chucked in was mad, but whether they were interested or not I don't have a clue. But yeah, it was it was probably about November time is when I really realised, right, I'm going to be off here. But it was a strange feeling because obviously everyone at Rovers got on so well, and it was such a good squad, and part of me all didn't want to leave because of how well we were doing as a team and how well I was doing as an individual. I sort of just wanted to carry that on. But I think there comes a time where you not that you don't want to move on, but I think you have to benefit your career, and sometimes what's the saying? You got to strike while the iron's hot sometimes, and I think that was definitely the case because 6 months later I ended up doing my ACL again. So who knows if I didn't leave at that time, injuries or whatever, loss of form, or I might not get back in the team, and so I think it was the perfect time to sort of leave. Although it was a tough one, to be fair, because like I said, I enjoyed it so much there. But yeah, probably that November before I left is when I really realised I'm going to probably be off now.
I remember obviously all of us looking after your results and asking after how you were doing. And actually that period before the summer was actually quite successful for you. You were doing really well. One of the things that I sort of always remember you talking about is that, training at Bristol Rovers was tough, but it was, it was manageable. It was doable. I can remember some of the boys saying, have you asked how Bill's doing? And 2 weeks into your time at Preston, he said, he basically has to go home and fall asleep straight away because training's so hard. Yeah. What was the difference between, a League One Bristol Rovers, tough enough environment, and then, I'm going to call them elite because they are, an elite championship club at Preston? What was the training ground environment like? Why were you, why was it not difficult because you managed to do it, but what was it that you were feeling like, oh my God, this is tough?
I think it was just the pure intensity of everything that we done. Like training, I remember after my first session, Alex Neil pulled me in to the office, and he had a sheet full of all the forwards in the team and how many at the distance they'd run and how many sprints they had done, and I was bottom of the pile. And I remember saying to him, "But my team won in like the five-a-sides," and he was like, "But you haven't run enough." And I remember thinking, "But my team was the team that won the sort of the comp," and that was obviously the standards that he had set, and sort of the standards of the championship, really. So yeah, it was a big difference to what I was used to, and like you said, I could probably get away with more at Rovers because I was doing so well. So yeah, the intensity and just the level of fitness was on a different level to what I'd sort of been used to for the sort of 2.5 years before. So that was the main thing, to be honest. That was the one thing that stood out straight away. And then obviously they were all very good footballers as well. On top of that, they were obviously very good athletes who could run all day and who were probably a lot quicker than me. So it made you sort of, for me anyway, it made me sort of try and be one step ahead. Because I'm not as strong, I'm not as quick as a lot of them. I always try to be sort of one step ahead with the ball or even without the ball. So it was tough, to be honest, to start. But yeah, that was the main thing was just the intensity and the level of fitness, really.
When you say intensity, obviously for the benefit of other people who might be moving up levels or progressing in their career or whatever, what do you mean by intensity? What was it?
I think just everything. The intensity of the manager. He wanted you to basically train as you would play a game. And at obviously Bristol Rovers, there was probably sessions where I just coast through. Not in a bad way, but that's just sort of how I was at times. I'd just float about and try and get on the ball and just be the player I was. But at Preston, it was, the manager, he demanded that you sort of reach these levels of intensity off the ball and on the ball. And yeah, it was a bit of a shock, to be honest, to start. But once the games started coming and I'd played my first couple of games, it obviously you get used to it and that's how you work then. And yeah, you just get accustomed to the way he wants to work, and if that's how he wanted to work, then we'd have to do exactly what he said, and it definitely benefited me because going into games then I certainly felt a lot fitter and a lot stronger.
See, I might be fast forwarding a little bit here, but you're right. At the end of that, 6 months later, you did have another knee injury. So sort of that, for the period of time you were at Preston, that middle season that you had, you were recovering from injury, really. So that was super difficult for you. I'm not going to get into obviously how you overcame that again, because I want to mostly talk about how you end up. Obviously, let's look back. Bristol Rovers, one of the most gifted players that they've had in recent times. You move on to Preston and you're doing really well, and then obviously this knee injury sort of stops you in your tracks. How difficult was it for you not only to get over that injury, but to get yourself back to a level? Because obviously Jayden Stockley played with you at Preston at that time, so I had a keen eye on looking after him and seeing what you guys were doing. And after that, your opportunity for appearances was limited. Really, you never really managed to get back in, which I think is obviously a shame because you'd worked so hard to get there that the injury almost stopped you in your tracks. How challenging was that, where you weren't really being given loads of opportunity?
Yeah, it was frustrating because when I did come back from that sort of summer, I felt good, and then I'd done my knee, and then so I had a whole year out. And when I did come back from that, I scored a few pre-season goals, and I actually felt really good, and I felt probably back to my best. And yeah, for whatever reason it was, I was sort of in and out of the team, and even when I sort of was fit, I wasn't sort of in the team. And like I said, I wouldn't go in asking why aren't I playing, but I'd always say sort of what do you want from me? What can I do to get into the team? And he always said he liked me as a player, and he wanted me to play, but it was just my fitness levels, maybe because I'd come back from a big injury, I wasn't quite as fit. So yeah, it was very frustrating at that time. And then probably once I did get into the team, it didn't help. I picked up the odd niggle, which would put me out maybe a week or 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden I was probably on the bench for 2 or 3 games and not coming on. And then before you know it, it was sort of Christmas time and I've barely played, and then you pick up another niggle because you're probably training too hard to try and get into the manager's plans. And yeah, it was a bit of a domino effect at that time. I just couldn't get myself sort of in the team and stay in the team. And it was tough because I remember sort of staying out, doing extra running and doing extra finishing and stuff, and then it was probably not helping because I was feeling sore the next day, and I do extra sort of gym sesh maybe now and again, and then you'd come in with tight hammies, and then that next session you're probably not training at your full capacity because you're feeling a little bit tight, and then all of a sudden you're injured again, or you pick up a little niggle because of one of these issues, and it was just a frustrating season. And to be honest, from then on, it was just a frustration throughout my time at Preston. Really,
it sounds like it was almost trying too hard at the time.
Yeah, I think so. I think you do try too hard at times, and because you just want to be playing, and when the manager's telling you you're in his plans, or he really likes you as a player, but you're not fit enough, then the first thing I thought is, well, I'll do more running to try and get as fit as I can, and then it probably backfires a little bit, and you end up going sort of back 2 steps. So yeah, it was a really frustrating time, and because at the end of the day, all you want to do is play and show what you can do. So yeah, it was very frustrating.
See, the kind of player you are, Bill, and we've spoken about the creativity and sometimes being the scapegoat for being left out of a team if that's not the case. Have you ever, like, I'm sort of thinking in my head here that it sounds like because you were putting so much effort into trying to do the right things that the manager wanted you to do, and trying to work on your fitness, trying to work on your finishing, doing these gym sessions that may have put you, at a lesser physical state for training the next day. Did you ever find that you were trying to do things differently to like that you were trying to be a different player than what you actually were to try and impress somebody else to try and get in the team? Do you ever find yourself doing that?
There has been times where I have felt a little bit like that, and I sort of take a step back and I think, hold on a minute, that's not me, or that's not how the player I am. But at that time, that's what sort of the manager wanted, and because the manager said I probably wasn't fit enough at that time, or whenever it was, it almost made me change a little bit, which was probably detrimental to my game and me as a person. So it's a difficult one because you want to be playing as much as you can, but if the manager says you're not playing because you're not fit, so you go out and do stuff which you wouldn't normally do, and then all of a sudden you're picking up little niggles because of this. It's a difficult one because at the end of the day, you want to impress the manager. You want to be in that 11. So if the manager's telling you to do something, you're going to do it, and you're probably at the time not going to think about the consequences it could have. So yeah, it was a strange it was a strange time of my career at that point.
How have you best in your career then, Bill, managed to find the balance between being involved in a team structure and also being a creative individual player?
What is in position or what?
Not necessarily position in terms of how. Let's take Rovers, obviously, just as an example. You were able to be a part of a team structurally and defensively, but also then in possession of the ball, you were able to be creative and have that sort of individual ability that you had. Whereas necessarily, probably in your time at Preston, you lost that sense of yourself to try and be in the team.
Yeah, I think like I said about you, Ledsey and Clarkey earlier, used to almost. I
Could
remember
have put in your deal, mate, that you needed one of us to come with you.
I actually remember Ledsey once saying, "Don't bother tracking back all the way because I'm a defender. I need to defend against either my winger I'm up against or maybe it might be a 2v1, but you're in the team to create, so stay as high as you can."
I never said that.
No. and just little things like that at times I'd still obviously try and get back as best as I can and help out as much as I can. But I think once I went into the championship, it was probably the wingers were a lot better. So fullbacks needed that help in a 1v1 to make it a 2v1. So yeah, that extra probably bit of running is probably the reason why sort of the manager at the time said you need to be fitter, because I probably was doing a lot more running than what I was used to. But yeah, I think for me, it's hard because managers want different things. And obviously Darryl Clark knew exactly how to sort of manage me as a player on the ball and off the ball, where since Darryl is probably, I've not probably had the freedom as much because of the way we probably played at Preston. Was very sort of front foot, in your face, high press, which obviously you need to be extremely fit. But one thing that worked for me that first sort of 6 months I was there, we sort of pressed high, and we were always high up in the pitch where I didn't need to go back tracking my fullback that's why I probably had a good 6 months, and I was enjoying it, and I was playing well as well at the time. So maybe that when I did get back fit after my ACL, we probably didn't quite play the same way as we did when I first signed. We weren't probably as in your face as we were when I first joined, and although probably when I thought about it, that's probably not my game, getting in your face, but then it obviously worked for that first 6 months, and when we did sort of let teams play a little bit more, that's probably when I wasn't in the team. So it's strange how things work in football, and sort of things that you think aren't you or are you, and then you go to a different team and you are quite good at something different, and yeah, it was just a frustrating time because I knew I could, if I was on the pitch, I could influence the game in some way, but obviously the manager didn't think I was fit enough at that time, which I think sometimes you've got to let the player, if you think he's good enough on the ball, let him get on the ball, and all right, he might not be as fit or he might not track back as much, but he's going to give you a bit more going forward than maybe someone else who is good at tracking back. So it is a difficult one, but at the end of the day, it's the manager's choice at times, and yeah, if you're on the wrong side of that, then it's just hard luck.
So where you at now then, Bill? Obviously, we're getting to the end. I've got some questions to ask you at the end, but I want to touch on your current time with Oxford, really, because having spoken to Matty Taylor the other day, and even just briefly at the sat at the training ground now, just seen him just before. He talks about when you joined Oxford. Obviously, he was asked his opinion of you and said absolutely, and told everybody how brilliant you were. And he said when you first joined, you might have obviously been a little bit rustier than what you were.
Yeah.
And he said that a couple of lads were saying, "Oh, is this the guy that you thought was as brilliant as he says?" Just give him 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Just give him a couple of weeks, and then within a few weeks, he said, "You're on absolute fire." So I'm interested to know, a couple of years below me, what you 30, 31,
30
Bill?
now, yeah.
30. So all your experiences in the past, you're an important player in an Oxford team at the moment who's, going for promotion. The last couple of years, they've been super successful and almost done it. Where are you at right now? What version of Billy Bodin sits across the table from me?
To be honest, I still think it's similar to the version at Bristol Rovers. I still want to do the exact same. I'm probably, obviously I am a little bit older, but probably a little bit slower as well. But like I said, that was never really my game to burst past people and to just sprint as quick as I can. That wasn't me. But It's a lot different actually, because I've played in numerous different positions. Obviously, with you, I was always a right winger of a 4 or a 3 up top. So, and on the right side was always where I preferred as well. But since joining Oxford, I've played as out wide on the right, out wide on the left, as a 9, as a 10, as an 8. So yeah, it's almost like the sort of, because I am that little bit older and I've got a bit more experience, that I'm capable of playing these different positions and doing a job, which is fine by me. Obviously, at times it can get a bit frustrating because you do want to sort of stick to one position and do as well as you can in that position. But yeah, if it means me playing sort of somewhere else, but I'm in the team, then so be it. As long as I'm on that pitch, I'll try and affect the game in some way.
All right, Bill, I'm just going to fire some questions at you to finish. There's only a few, mate, but I put you on the spot straight away. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received in your career?
The best piece, probably from my dad. He said there was a player he played with when he was younger, used to get in his car, put a tape into his car, and it was a psychologist used to say certain words, and he used to always have, whenever he got in the car with him, it would always say work, tackle, chase. So he used to always say to me as a young lad, when I was probably from like 8 to 15, work, tackle, chase. And whenever I go onto the pitch now, I always think of those 3 things. And I think if you do those 3 things, then I'm sure you'll end up not having a great game. You might not, but at least you've done your best, and you've worked, you've got around the pitch to tackle, and you've chased down whatever it needs to be chased. So yeah, my dad's told me that at a young age, and I've always sort of thought of those 3 words.
That's good. I always like it when, obviously, piece of advice, quite a lot of people's advice is the same as somebody else's, but that's the first time I've heard that, so that's quite nice. Work, tackle, chase.
Yeah, WTC he used to say. Yeah, yeah. So it's always stuck with me, and whether it is right or wrong, then I don't know. But yeah, it's always worked for me.
Stuck with you so much that you do the opposite sometimes. Yeah. A second one, Bill, is what stands out in your mind as your best performance ever?
Best performance ever. I'd probably... There's one for Preston which stuck out. It was actually when I scored my first goal, and it was against Nottingham Forest.
Just about to say Forest away.
Yeah. Actually, both my 2 best performances are probably both against Forest. The one when I got my first goal for the club, and then I won a penalties in the second half, and yeah, it was just one of them games where things were coming off, and I was taking people on and creating chances. And then the second time I played them, I actually played as a lone striker, as a false 9, and that's probably where I felt most comfortable. It was basically playing as a 10, and I scored that day as well, and probably should have scored a few more and set up a few good chances. But yeah, I'd probably say either of them 2 games was probably one of my better performances.
Is there anything that you can pinpoint now, sat here now, thinking about when you play well, when you don't play well? Is there anything you can pinpoint between the 2 as to why one happens or the other one does?
I always think if I come off the pitch and I haven't had at least sort of 2 shots, I've obviously not done enough in the game to, or not done enough off the ball to affect the game or try and get on the ball. So yeah, I always, if I come off and I've not had at least a couple of shots or chances, then I need to look at myself and probably think, have I done enough off the ball am I making the right runs, or am I getting into the box at the right time, or just little things like that. And then say if I did sort of play out wide and I haven't sort of beat my man or got maybe 4 or 5 crosses in, I'd sort of think the same. Why haven't I? If I'm playing out wide, I should be getting at least sort of 5 crosses in a game, or taking my man on at least 5 times. So if I haven't done those things, I'll sort of think, well, there why haven't I? Have I not checked away quick enough, or have I not made enough space between me and the fullback? So yeah, just little things like that, really.
The next one, mate, is good advice. I'm interested to know, actually, Bill, there, when you're talking about it, that you measure your performances as much as you do. I used to think that you were sort of like a whatever happens kind of guy, but it's actually quite interesting that even given that perception of you, that you've got stuff that can measure your performances. I think that's something that people can really take away from you. Two more, mate. Second to last is, what do you think the most important attribute is that players need to have if they're going to make a career in the game?
I think the main one for me anyway is your mentality and your mental strength. Obviously for me it was important because of the injuries I had at the times in my career, and just to obviously fall out of the game pretty much and not have a club. My mental strength was probably what needed to be at its best at that time to really go into a club and kick on again. So yeah, I'd say my mental strength. Yeah,
I'd agree. And lastly, mate, what advice would you give to young Billy Bodin just starting out his career?
Probably to be more confident as a young lad. I think there was times when I was probably at Swindon where I was probably, because I was young and I was tiny, and I was probably didn't quite come out of my shell as quick as I could have, or just voiced my opinion. I think there's times where I probably could have spoke up a little bit more or spoke to the manager more at that time. Like I said, when I spoke to Canio, maybe I could have spoke to him again just to find out how I can get into the team. And as a young lad, I would have probably a bit more confident in myself.
It's funny you say that, Bill, because I've always known you as a confident person. But like you say, maybe if you had that earlier on in your career, then we might not be looking at Billy Bodin, who's only played for 2.5, 3 years in the Championship, but maybe for much longer, because certainly you were capable, talent-wise. But listen, thank you very much, mate, for for obviously inviting me into the football club and allowing me to speak to you. Two, for being as honest as you have been about the highs and lows of your career, because a lot of people see the Saturday matchday version of Billy Bodin. They see the Bristol Rovers version and the Oxford version and the talented version, but they might not know too much about how much sacrifice that person's actually had to go through to reach those levels. So not only are you one of the most talented players that I've played with, but like I said to you before, a lot of the Rovers guys during that era would also say the same thing. So thank you very much, mate, for giving us an insight into your career.
No worries. Thank you for having me, mate.
Really appreciate it, Bill. Top man.
Thank you.